You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. It's 7:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And tonight I thought I would talk about mentalizing versus emotional regulation and how the meditation approach differs with attachment repair. I think this is really one of the fundamental differences in the Mettagroup approach with the more psychotherapy-based approaches. And I think that that is also true because of the way that Buddhist philosophy understands the construction of self. In Western psychology, if I can make these, sweeping generalist statements with no citations to back anything up. The main activity is the deconstruction of self and how the self experiences the world and how the self relates to other people in the world. In Buddhist philosophy, the world is other people, not this place that's around us. And so, if you look at the Satipatthana Sutta, the refrain that repeats 17 times. Mindfulness of inside, mindfulness of outside, mindfulness of inside and outside. What we're really looking at is this structure of self that we create and the structure of other people. And then can we, in real time, monitor the interaction, the reaction to the other person and how that affects the self and how we monitor the other person's reaction to our sense of self. And can we really understand that? That would be mentalizing, right? To be able to understand that you represent yourself as a working model. This is how it ties in so seamlessly to attachment theory and attachment thought. Bowlby's understanding that we create a working model of self, we create a working model of other people, and we attempt to understand the interactions between these two working models. In classical Freudian theory, it's instincts. You get into the Kleinian stuff, it's object relations and projection. In Buddhist philosophy, of course, the self is insubstantial and is created in the moment based on conditions, which is very different than a Western concept of a self that's consistent and actionable over time. Really, the sense of self arises based on the conditions of the present moment in a relationship to the conditions of the present moment. When you say a working model, what that really means is these gists, these little capsules of a memory that are associated to one working model or another. And then when something happens in the present moment that activates that patterning of self, we recognize, oh, this is me. And when it activates a representation of someone else, we think, oh, that's you. A gist, if I can use the metaphor of a recording studio. Have you ever been in a recording studio when they're mixing down a track? And you have in front of you this large mixing board that has all of these different tracks on it. And the recordings are separated, let's say 8 tracks or 16 tracks, something. And as you go through the song, you set all of these levels. Then you get into the next part of the song and you set all of these levels. And then when you get all the way through the song, setting all of the different levels, you run the song through and shift all of the different levels. And so a lot of these boards are completely automatic. And you have this well-mixed track where everything is balanced at the end. So you might say that a gist is one of the particular settings of the board, and the board is the body, let's say. So You remember something that just goes off and it changes the settings in the board, the sensitivities between the sense gates as you've gathered the material. And it recreates in the present moment in memory. That is to say, the recreation in the present moment of the setup of the experience and what the experience meant to you. We don't really operate on what happens. We don't have the capacity to record what happens and then play it back and reflect in the present moment on something that was um, uh, representative of what happened. What we have is the capacity to reset the body into a similar state and then play the meaning that we made out of the encounter that we had. And so we're in each moment creating the meaning of the experience that we had, activating these working models. You're thinking a thought, and the thought plays, and in the thought, you're speaking to someone or you're watching two people speak, and you have the sense because of the physical sense of the body and the emotional component of the body that the memory is an accurate representation of what happened. But actually, it's a replay or a recreation of what it meant to you. And depending on what state you were in, it could be accurate or not accurate. And whether you understood properly what was actually happening or your version of it is quite different than what other people's perceptions of what happened are, you're still in the meaning that you make out of it. If you remember something from childhood when you were 5 years old, you no longer have a 5-year-old body to remember it in. You have a whole different cognitive capacity to reflect on it. All you have are the rudimentary settings of the experience that you had that changes or adapts to the body that you have now and the meaning of it, and it plays. And then you create in the present moment the version that you're experiencing now, right? Is that making sense? Um, So, in order to mentalize that, well, you have to be able to track all of that, all of the different sense gates to see what the settings are, to understand the auditory, visual, felt sense of the body, taste and smell, all of those, plus mind. What was mind doing? What was mind focusing on? And then there's the physical quality of the body, and then the emotional quality of the body. All of those things create the sense of meaning that we have. One of the things that's also important about meaning is the relationship, right? So mindfulness of inside, mindfulness of outside, mindfulness of inside and outside is really about the expression of our experience to someone else. Why is that important in generating meaning? It's important because the process of making the meaning is often the same process of figuring out what it is that we want to communicate to someone, right? And without the need to communicate to someone, without anyone being available to us to communicate it, we don't necessarily go through a process of assigning meaning to anything. And also, we don't have a good means of testing the accuracy of what it is that we've created in the present moment. It's not that we're relying on the other person to define the meaning of the experience that we have, but whether they receive it and it seems likely or they receive it and it seems unlikely gives us an indication about whether we should review the structure and meaning of what we're experiencing. Is that making sense? So the mentalizing frame that I like to talk about is we are able to understand in the present moment the experience that we're having. That is to say, we're able to touch into the felt sense of it in the body, the visual aspect that we pick out of the environment. In the West, we often think that the body mind experiences in a neutral way everything that's happening around us and that we create a version of that that's largely accurate. That's the Aristotelian view. In the Buddhist view, we highly curate a selection of mind moments that we select, grabbing the things that we prefer and leaving out the things that don't matter to us and avoiding the things that we don't like. So that we really pick a very curated misrepresentation of the general in the way that we experience what's happening in the present moment. So the capacity to sense, touch, sight, sound, taste, smell, mind. Mind is what directs your attention. The object has contact with the sensing experience. Consciousness of the sensing experience arises. That makes sense. Capacity to sense, the object that can be sensed by that sense gate. When there's contact, consciousness arises. It's then really evaluated by the body for urgency. This is the Buddhist model, right? If it needs urgent attention, it skips the line and goes to the top of the queue. If it doesn't matter, if there's no need to ever pay attention to the gathering of a particular sense data, nothing ever happens with it. And if there's time for a pleasant experience, then we have a pleasant experience. The brain science is pretty good on this. 3/8 of a second to process something that's urgent, a half a second to process something that's pleasant. A shorter duration, a shorter pressure for urgent, a longer uh, duration, and a higher pressure of sensation in order to process something positive. It then forms this queue, which is compared to the perceptual database. And if there's a meaning in the perceptual database that's close enough to the undifferentiated, unfixated, unformed sensing moment, then the whole thread of meaning comes down and attaches and it rolls into conceptual reality. That is to say, we make a tableau of the world around us that feels solid and compelling. If you're a sighted person, one way that you can figure that out is if you look around the room and everything looks in focus and everything has detail in it, you're in the construction of the mind and not in the sensing experience. Have you ever looked for your keys and not found them and not found them and not found them and found them in the place you looked 3 times already? That's this. You created a picture of where the keys were without the keys in them because it didn't make sense to you in some level that they would be there. So you looked and you looked and you looked. And then finally, when you put the effort into recreating every single place that you looked, you created the place more like it was and the keys were there. The brain is very economical in the way that it processes things. And if it can get away with using an old image over having to recreate the image new, it will use the old image. I last December, I changed all of the pictures in my living room to different pictures. And I have a friend who comes over for dinner once a week. And in June, no, in March, last month, or April, no, in February. In February, he said, "Oh, you put new pictures on the wall." I said, "Yeah, I put new pictures on the wall 3 months ago, and you've been here 5 times, and you didn't notice them, right? Because the mind recreates the environment using the old imagery. So you can't even be sure that this creation that you're currently inhabiting is actually what's happening now, right? And the insurance industry says that a motorcycle with one headlight is 9 times more likely to be in an accident with a car than a motorcycle with 2 headlights. The most common excuse of a driver who runs a motorcycle off the road is, it wasn't there. And this is particularly true on commuter routes where you're driving back and forth on the same road. Do you ever leave work and get home and not really remember the space between? The mind is just driving on automatic. So the mentalizing is to push the mind into every time making a new representation rather than allowing it to rely on the old. To examine as you make meaning, Tajapanati is the word for this, that you're reflecting backward onto what you make. Uh, so that would suggest that your orientation is in the sensing experience, not in the fabrication, right? But how easily can you discern the sensing experience, the pure sensing experience, from what you made it into? And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that it enters consciousness most of the time already defined, already solidified into these representations. And it's very easy, if you don't begin to mentalize it, to just accept the version that the mind has landed on. So one of these mentalizing skills, of course, is to be able to reflect backwards from the sensing experience onto what you created to see whether it's actually representative of that. So that when we talk about recognizing the experience of the creation of self and others through the attachment frame, through this Buddhist meditation frame, what we're really talking about is this moment by moment manufacturing of self and world, rather than reifying, which is often what happens in Western psychology, reifying the self experience as being something that's fixed. I think this is particularly true of people who do parts work because they talk about parts of themselves in a reified way as if they actually exist as a separate part from the whole, and that it's an interaction of parts that are stable and fixed rather than a moment by moment creation of the experience of self and world, which is more on the Buddhist side of things. So that working with attachment conditioning and attachment repair on the meditation side means that we're experiencing over and over again these creations of self and world, mainly by reflecting back on them and comparing them to the sensing experience to see how well they match, rather than reifying the sense of self into something stable and solid. Uh, in the meditation frame, they're arising based on conditions, and there is no solid, retrievable, consistent self response. It's always made up based on conditions of the present moment. There aren't fixed parts. There isn't an ongoing self experience that existed from the beginning of your life to now that will exist into the future. It's momentary, it's instantaneous, and it comes and goes. I guess you'd have to imagine the experience of your life to see whether that would be true or not. Is the self this constant thing or not? When the self experience arises in consciousness, which is not to say that it doesn't, of course it does. It's an organizing principle that we use in a way of relating to other people. Uh, you're understanding that I'm speaking English and you're making meaning out of the words that I'm saying. But we would have to have a conversation about meaning to understand that your definitions of the words I'm using match the definitions that I use in the creation of the sentences, right? You could understand something quite different than what I'm intending you to understand because you are defining all the words differently. And so part of what this process is, so that first level of mentalizing is where you understand that you have just created the experience of the present moment that you're having based on your conditioning, and you understand what conditioning you're using to define the present moment. That's that piece of deconstructing self as it arises. Once you understand all of that, the second part of it is, what about that do you want to communicate to someone else? That's this process of meaning making in relationship to someone else. Have you ever noticed that your thinking can get wildly off if you don't ever express anything to anyone else? Your perception of self and world can get quite distorted in a way that might not be so useful because you never actually uh, uh, define what actually you mean. You never define how you've made the experience of reality. If you don't like the experiences of reality, you could split them off and project them on someone else and think that they're expressing that to you, which is a way in which the experiences of Western psychology and the information that's been gathered in that process can be very useful in illuminating the sense of the activity of self. But we're really organized around this momentary creation of self and world, and not so much on these chunks or pieces or parts of self, not in the sense that you're this way or that way. You are responding to the conditions of the present moment. And depending on the conditions, you can be wildly disparate in how you respond. In communicating to someone else, there's a transliteration often where you understand the definitions that they use, and so that you explain to them what you mean in a way that they're likely to understand what you mean. But then you check, you validate that they've understood actually what you mean. You probably have heard me use the metaphor of cherries and raspberries. I love cherries. This is not a good time of year for cherries, although there's still some from Chile that are available if you don't mind the astronomical carbon use associated flying them here from there. Uh, and cherries are one of those fruits that don't ripen after you pick them, so you have to pick them ripe, and uh, and they don't last very long. Stone fruit typically doesn't last so long, although some stone fruit you can pick green and it will ripen. This is not true of cherries. But if you get a fresh, ripe cherry, there's a complexity to the taste of it, at least in reaction to my tongue, that I find astonishing. And every now and then you just get a magnificent cherry out of the bunch, and the taste experience is mind blowing. But let's say you think cherries are rather ho hum. And so I say to you that this experience is so fascinating, it's so interesting, and so amazing. It's just like cherries, and you think, that's ho hum, I'll skip it. Uh, Now, had I said to you, it's just like raspberries, you would have said, oh, that's intriguing. I love raspberries. There's complexity there. So that's what I mean by transliteration. You explain things to people in a way that they understand what you mean, not what they would mean if they were using the way that they described. If they used your words to describe something, they would mean something else. Then what you have to do is listen to their response, right? They express to you their response to what you communicated to them, and then you have to understand that you've understood them, because then you can modify your understanding of the relationship that you're having. And if those pieces aren't in there, they could be having a completely different relationship than you're having. You ever notice that? One, one or both people are in a fantasy of what the relationship is, rather than in a communicated, shared experience of what it is. The mentalizing capacity is linked to the emotional regulation capacity. if you get really emotionally regulated, it diminishes or collapses the capacity to mentalize, and then you're simply in these constructions of the body mind where the meaning that you're making, the reaction that you're having, is related to the memory, the gists that you set up, and are often related to a time different than the time you're in. Often different. Time, of course, we could say is a construct. That have you noticed that you only exist, that you've never existed outside of the present moment? It's always only ever been the present moment. So in that sense, time is irrelevant, right? There's no escaping the experience of the present moment. And in fact, because we define the experience of the present moment on what has already happened, the past and the present moment are in somewhat the same. And because we expect things to happen, we anticipate things happening based on the meaning that we give them. The future is also all compressed in this sliver of experience. Is that making sense? Does that match what your experience is? The eternity, the unending present moment. And yet we seem to be older. David.
Do you have a suggestion on what to do when somebody is constantly dwelling on the past and saying, "Oh, you always do this. It always turns out that way." Is there a way to flip that into the present?
Um, you always do this means that they're interpreting or are eliciting from you a different kind of care. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, well, like you never listen. You always leave the toilet seat down. There's some
So,
people that I think there's some people that live their whole lives as if it's always going to be the same way it's always been and not relish the present or think that things can change for the better. Is it?
the so the non-mentalizing frame is where we're at, a non-mentalizing frame. Uh, if you would say it's always the same and it always turns out the same, that would mean that you are not actually in the experience of the present moment, which is never the same, right? So you're not mentalizing at that level. You always do the same thing, which means they're assigning meaning to something. Is it uh, um, a request for something, right? When you say that it's always the same, what is it that you're actually asking of me? How would you like, I mean, you would like it to be different, you would like me to be different, or you would like me to respond to in a different way. What is it that we're actually talking about? Because it's always the same and it always turns out the same, doesn't actually provide much in the way of information, but sounds like a request for
Mhm.
closeness, a request for response. Could you say instead that you want closeness? Could you say instead that you're looking for a particular response because that's all being pushed on me, right? Or maybe it's you who keep having the same experience and that you don't want to hold on to that. So you're splitting it off onto me, and I'm the one who's suddenly responsible for all of that.
Hmm.
Am I really the one who's responsible for how your perception of the present moment is? I don't even have capacity to do much about that, really.
Thank you.
What do you want? All you have to do is ask. I'll give it to you. What do you want? That would mean they would have to begin a mentalizing process of what is it that was absent uh, for them in that creation of it's always the same and the outcome is always going to be lacking, right? What is the big lack, uh, to use a Lacanian term? What is the big lack that you're describing in saying it's always the same? What's missing? So that you push it back onto them. You throw the ball back on that side of the court and let them fumble. PJ.
It feels to me sometimes like it just feels like time travel.
It can, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, you are here now, but you're not. I get this feeling sometimes, not so often anymore, but I used to get really triggered and it felt like I flew back to some time in the past, right?
Yeah. So
But it
that's the collapse of mentalizing and the
yeah,
overtaking of emotion.
yeah,
Grounding. Here we are, grounding in the
yeah.
present
Look
moment.
around, look at
Here
things,
we are.
feel my body, look for colors. Yeah.
And then understand what is it about this moment that had the body mind grab that set of gists to attach to it? What is
Yeah.
it about this present moment?
It took me a long time to figure out that it was being triggered by something. I just thought I was nuts, right? It was
Oh,
like, and I was a bit.
right. Well, that um, the use of fantasy, right? If we can use the term fantasy, the use of soothing narratives. Remember, we're always generating these narratives to correspond to what our experience is, which tend to have a soothing quality to them.
Oh, I'm thinking of like more stressful things though, like the wrong look from somebody, and suddenly I'm not here. I'm
Right.
somewhere a long time ago where I'm afraid, even though there's nothing actually to be afraid of, but it's just the look in somebody's eye or something.
So you've understood when I said fantasy that I meant something pleasant.
Yes.
I didn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah, okay.
Uh,
Yeah, but it is
the
like that. It's like,
fantasy of rejection and condemnation is also
yes.
a fantasy if it's not happening.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
So why did we create that fantasy in the experience of the present moment, and what is it distracting us from so that we don't actually know? In that scenario, if it was something like me, it would be longing for connection to them, and then being frightened to actually express it, and then relieving myself of the need to express it by creating the fantasy of rejection, so that I don't even have to venture forward and see whether I'll actually be rejected. I just self-reject. Uh,
Saves
that's
time.
um, but it's too much energy. What I like to say is just let them reject you.
Yeah.
It's easier. Or not.
Yeah.
One of the things, when you finally figure out that yes is way harder than no, that it makes the yeses more interesting. Somebody says no, and then off you go, right? Somebody says yes, and then all of a sudden you have to engage, right? Um, the and this really ties into the way that when you work with attachment conditioning, or actually any conditioning, really, in this model of how we create the experience of the present moment. The capacity to sense means the object can be sensed, the body evaluates the urgency, the Vedana, and then your undifferentiated sensing experiences are compared to the database, the conditioned database of meanings, not of what happens, of meanings. And then you attach a meaning to the present moment, and it creates a conceptual reality that is defined by that meaning. And the process is automatic and usually fast enough that it precedes consciousness. So it just comes into the self experience already formulated. And if you're not used to really getting into it and you don't have the mentalizing capacity to do it fast enough, you just react to the creation as if that's what's happening, which then, of course, creates karma, right? You make an intention, you take an action, the action then has consequences, and you gather the outcome. not what happens, but what it meant, what happened, what happened meant to you, and then that gets thrown into the database. So the way to change that mechanism is in this visualization process of layering into the database these visualized experiences that contradict the conditioning. The way to change conditioning is to reimagine it in a way that's optimal. Because the body mind can use whatever is in the database to define reality, since it's not about what happens, it's about meaning. You can have a visualization that creates meaning that's different, and use that in the construction of the present moment. And of course, you're gathering something that did happen and associating it so that the imaginings, the visualizations that are, indeed rickety in the beginning, develop heft because you use them to define the present moment and then gather something that did actually happen. I'm not quite understanding your question, David.
Sorry, the way I understand the ideal parenting is you take what was a bad parenting situation that you were in, you create an ideal parent and replace what happened with the ideal and kind of create a new set of synapses or and so
Right.
you then have a much more comfortable way of thinking about how you were brought up because you've now replaced the bad parenting with ideal parenting. Did I just hear you say you take a situation and you reimagine it in more of an ideal setting so that way you can come from a better place in that situation because instead of basing it on past memories that went bad, you're now imagining a good outcome and therefore it's
Right. You're reimagining the meaning of the situation
yeah,
so that it has, uh, so that you have an alternative definition to use when something like it happens in the present moment and it's been identified as that pattern. That gist is then you have alternative meanings associated with that kind of experience. And the body mind will typically go to the low calorie choice is really what's happening. Positive experience is less intense than negative experience.
so positive point of view helps in more ways than just faking it till you make it. It actually reconditions your brain into something that's more pleasant.
Right. It creates a different way of understanding the meaning of what's happening. In the PJ was talking about this, the link to the present moment experience or losing touch with that also can be part of it. The 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 lack of resolution, the lack of integrated meaning, or even a dissociative experience which is not tethered to a particular timeline or a particular reference to the past and the present, can easily create in the present moment what actually is an experience from the past because it's not anchored in that way. We have astonishing flexibility in how we define what's happening. It's really easy to understand someone's intentions differently than they understand them. And if you aren't free to engage in a dialogue about that, that is to say, you become too frightened to express authentically what your experience is, or to inquire authentically what their meaning was, what the meaning was in their action, then it's very easy to get skewed in a way. You're having one experience of what's happening, and they're having another experience of what's happening. We would call that, I think, in Western psychology, a fantasy relationship rather than one that's tethered in a collaborative exchange with the other person. How easy is it for you? How easy is it for you to express yourself authentically? How easy is it for you to regulate the level of vulnerability that you express to someone? Is it based on their demonstrations of trustworthiness, or is it based on a wish that they would be trustworthy? Right? Those are those bases. If you like somebody, you like them because if you meet somebody and you like them, you're recognizing a working model of somebody that you like, right? Because you don't know them that well. You don't know what their actual, you haven't really created a model for them. You're borrowing a working model of someone else. And then as you get to know them, you're actually engaged in the process of constructing a working model of them. So that's going to take time, right? It's going to take encountering them in a lot of different situations so that you can get a varied response to the situations, and you can witness the way that they make meaning out of that so that you can understand who they are. And then you begin to build a robust modeling of them. But what can also happen is you simply decide that they're the working model that you've already constructed of someone else, and they become the avatar that you're using. Christian.
I don't know if this formulation sounds perverse, but um,
You've worked at it and it should.
yeah. I mean, I'm coming through this like the kind of Lacanian or the Zizek'ian lens. Like you're kind of constructing a maybe more workable, flexible fantasy that the other person fits into.
Yeah, if you don't check.
Sure.
If you do check, then you have to adapt your working model to match what their meaning is, so that it's accurate, right? That it actually represents them. The I was reading, and I can't tell whether it's a flip Zizakian comment, and that he said that we don't want to get rid of the fantasy. We don't want to get rid of the big other because we all depend on the big other for all of the things that we don't do. And if we were to get rid of the big other, then we would have to blame ourselves for everything that we don't do. And none of us are willing to do that. That it would be a disaster to live an authentic life in that way.
Yeah. My understanding of that kind of lens is that we can only love people through fantasy.
Right.
That there's no like other, that's like the form of mediation, right? And it sounds really traumatic until you kind of accept it, and then it's like, all right, that's fine.
Well, another way to say that might be that we don't know what's happening. We know what meaning we make.
Right.
So we're making a meaning of somebody, and is that meaning representative of them or not? And then how do we respond when there's an indication that the meaning that we've given doesn't actually correspond to who's there? Do we take the dismissing approach and bully them into being who it is that we want? Do we take the preoccupied approach and just pretend that they're that way, or pretend to be who they want? Do we manipulate them into the position that we want them into? To go so deeply into the whole sense of justice, right? Is it true? Are we both agreeing that it's true, and are we both authentic in our agreement? Or are we both pretending that it's true because we perceive that the other of us needs that? And then when the rug comes out, of course, the emperor has no clothes. And then how devastating is that for your sense of well-being?
That could actually be really hot.
Well, it is one of those things, in the attachment world. What makes attachment work? It's predictable, it's reliable, it's steady. What makes eroticism work? Unpredictableness, difference, all of that stuff. And so, in an attachment relationship that has that erotic quality to it, they're in some sense working against each other. How do you balance the dependency of an attachment relationship with a relationship long erotic life? And then that might be the place where fantasy comes in. That you can step out of the reliability, the ordinariness of the attachment relationship into something exotic, role playing. There's lots of people engage in theatrical sex. It always makes me laugh, and it's not really erotic, but some of the outfits are great. Kindness is the great aphrodisiac in my mind, but that isn't really true of a lot of people. Um, in the development of mentalizing using meditation develops mentalizing really well, particularly Vipassana, particularly that insight practices. And emotional regulation you can explore using Vipassana, but what it really is about is developing an equanimity with the intensity of sensation, the emotional sensation, neither grabbing onto it, neither resisting it, neither denying that it's there. And then the intentional development of positivity is the other aspect of it. In attachment conditioning, because the circumstances of children who grow up to be insecure, disorganized adults are so extreme, what you tend to find is that their internal working model of emotion is decidedly lopsided on negative emotional states. You have the reaction to the present moment, you have the thought processes that you use to regulate it. If you grow up in the harshness of a family system that would produce insecure, disorganized attachment, likely those regulating thought processes are also going to be pretty harsh and generate strong negative emotions. If the body-mind system is overwhelmed emotionally in childhood, it stores the emotion. Somaticized emotion is the word for it, which then contributes to the perception of the emotional experience, the emotional reaction to the present moment. If we can say that an emotion is the preparation for the response, the pattern of experience in the body, as the body prepares to take the action, is what we identify as an emotional pattern. And in difficult environments where we're constantly needing to be vigilant, we're constantly needing to provide some kind of protection or some kind of flight, creates a strong negative valence for emotion and maybe not so much capacity for positive emotion. So we have to intentionally develop the capacity for positivity. And in fact, we want to do it so well that we lopside the system on the side of positives, that the default becomes these positive responses rather than these negative responses. That's also something that meditation is really good at. And then we need to explicitly talk about the quality of the relationships that we have with other people. It's funny, I've been teaching these workshops, and I had somebody say to me on Saturday, which I thought was pretty funny. She said, "People don't do that." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "They don't talk about relationships." And I said, "You sure about that? Some people talk about relationships." And she says, maybe here in Mettagroup, in this little group of 8 people, we talk about emotions, but out there in the world, nobody talks about emotions. We just try and get along. And I said, well, you could, if there's a problem in the relation, bring it up and see whether you could negotiate. And then she said, oh, I get you. You mean implicitly. You could suggest. I said, no, explicitly. And she said, nobody does that. I don't know anyone who does that. I've never heard of anyone doing that. That would be role-based relationships, right? You just step into the role and you enact the role as best you can without so much guidance in it. So one of the aspects of course, learning secure functioning relationships is to discuss relationships and discuss relational dynamics and to come into a place of authentically expressing what your relational needs are and negotiating with someone else to get taken care of in the way that you need. And in understanding the frame of secure functioning relationships, the idea is that I take care of you in the way that you need to be taken care of so that you feel taken care of. And I'm willing to do that for you if you take care of me in the way that I need to feel taken care of. And we collaborate with each other on how we should do that for each other so that each of us feels taken care of. And this is the whole picture, the whole of the care, not individual aspects of the care and trade for some other aspect of care. But if you don't do that, then of course you're just relying on your conditioning meshing with their conditioning in a way that doesn't produce homicide or whatever it might produce. A long-lasting, stable relationship. And why would you even want a long-lasting, stable relationship? This is the other aspect of it. Because it supports your exploration and supports your possibility of going into the world and exploring it in such a way that you derive meaning from this life that you have. That's what it's for. That makes sense. And without that safety net of relationships to catch you, what typically happens is we begin to limit the risk we're willing to take, the authentic risk. And I think that actually that's what most people do. They don't explore so much. They gather the time, energy, and resources that they need, and then they hide out. And I think our culture is really good at offering forms of distraction that you can hide out and you can justify not doing it. But it doesn't relieve the despair. You can distract yourself from despair, but as soon as the episode ends, it immediately appears again. It's so that you have to watch another episode. Do you ever find yourself surfing through shows and thinking, oh my God, there's only one season. I can't possibly watch that show. I'll get to the end of it and then I have to wait for season 2. I can't bear that. There's only one episode a week. I'll wait until they're all out and I can just gang watch them. All of those strategies for distraction.
There used to be, like, before the streaming era, you used to like get together with people and talk about stuff at the water cooler, and like there was a whole social component to watching TV. The streaming era killed all the social component of it.
Yeah, totally. Well, you get to post 3 emojis.
Those posts are just read by bots.
Now you don't even have to post. There's AI for posting. I think that one of the reasons why the meditation approach to attachment repair is so useful is because it really is very targeted on these things that have to happen. And in a general therapeutic approach, particularly if it's reliant on the relationship as the main agent for change, doesn't tend to work so well. The lineup between your attachment conditioning and somebody else's attachment conditioning has to be so, um, you know, in line with what needs to happen. And then it requires the interpretations to be actually accurate, which would require you to be able to actually be authentic in the relationship rather than representing yourself in a way. It's particularly challenging for preoccupied people to represent themselves accurately, to represent themselves authentically. And if you're skillful at pretend, if you're skillful at misrepresentation, it's very hard for people to tell, particularly in a therapeutic setting, where you really, your obligation is only to present, right? What else is necessary in that follow through? So if you can't figure out as the clinician whether they're accurately representing what's happening, there are these long stretches of the engagement that don't really lead to much in the way of change except for elaboration. And when it's focused more on these the ideal parent figure protocol, the meditation, and the development of positivity, so the emotional regulation and the mentalizing capacities that come from meditation, and then also the education around what collaborative relationships are supposed to be like, that has a tendency to speed it up anyway. What do you say we do a little bit of practice? What would you like to do?
Vipassana?
Okay.
Whatever's good for
PJ?
developing a sense of positivity.
That would be metta. Christian, you're the tiebreaker. He's going to say IPM.
No,
Yeah.
sorry, David. I like the Vipassana tonight.
All right. So go ahead and settle in, closing your eyes. Okay. Let go of the meditation. How's that? Good. Christian.
George, what do you I guess this can happen in any of the domains, but what do you make of the kind of pre-verbal burbles and gurgles? Do you like sometimes practice, do you sometimes put the boundary of noting on one side or the other of those, or do you always kind of exclude those?
I think it doesn't matter whether you exclude them or you just give them whatever it seems like the appropriate label is. The categories of the labels are pretty broad anyway and overlapping.
Okay. I guess I was kind of wondering uh, if there's like if there would be a logic or kind of an outcome of including or excluding those from like regular practice.
In a see, hear, feel, focus in, focus out, any sensation that you can detect is included.
Okay.
And then clarity, of course, will develop over time. Discernment will develop over time. The rumblings in auditory space are the ones that are usually there, and then the cognition of what the thought would be arises, and then the clear talk of the thought arises. So the focus in, focus out of that part of it is that area of it doesn't matter where you put it.
Okay.
You could say, oh, it's a feel in. No, it's a feel out. It's a feel out. It's a physical sensation of vibration. But then the cognition of what would say arises, and then the clear talk arises. So then is that feel out, or is it an aspect of here in? Is an example of the fuzzy quality of it.
Mhm.
In some sense, we might then be talking about the addition of rest space. So, for instance, in visual thinking, your attention is drawn to the screen, but the screen is just swirling. What is that? Is that flow? Is that see in? Is that see rest? So,
Okay. Lot fun, lots of options.
yeah, good. Someone else? If you're in New York next a week from Saturday, I'll be doing a day long on meditation and addiction there at Insight New York. We have a level 2 starting this month. We're going to do it on Wednesday morning, so that if that's a good time for you, if you've done level 2 before and you were thinking of repeating it, we've also created an option where you can we'll offer you the course at half off for people that have already done it if they want to repeat it. Sometimes, because each time the class is taught in the Socratic method, they're quite different, or can be quite different from each other. What information is offered and what isn't. Plus, hopefully, I'm always learning something or other, which will change my perspective so that I see it differently. Um, what else? I think Kaleidoscope is this month. We have uh, that coming up. So anyway, it's on the calendar. Take a look. Appreciate your practice. I appreciate you being here. I enjoy your company. I offer the teaching freely, but I do hope if you're able to make a donation, you will, because it supports me and also the work Mettagroup is doing. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye.